Hello, and thank you for joining us this afternoon. This is the Q3 webinar for the Affordable Solar and Storage Pre-Development and Technical Assistance Solicitation, or Pre-Development Program for short. My name is Dylan Cunningham, and I'm an Assistant Project Manager on the New-York-Sun team at NY-SRTA. We're excited to get started with today's webinar, but before we do, I'd like to note some webinar housekeeping. So to start, all participants will remain muted during today's webinar. If you have a question or comment, please use the Q&A feature at the bottom right-hand side of WebEx, and we will answer questions at the end of the webinar. We are also recording today's presentation, and we'll post that as well as these presentation slides to the Pre-Development Program webpage for your reference afterwards. We will send a follow-up email with that information in a couple of days once it's all posted. And I highly encourage everyone to take a look at these presentation slides after they're posted, because the last 8 slides have information about other NY-SRTA programs and resources for multifamily buildings. And we typically don't really dive into that during today's webinar. So lastly, before we get started, to provide some background on this series, we started this quarterly webinar series with the goal of creating an open and ongoing platform to share information and answer questions about the pre-development program with interested stakeholders. So today's webinar will, let me just go to the next slide. We'll start with an overview of the program, followed by program updates. Chris will have some information for you there, followed by supported activities and how to apply. Then we'll end with time to address questions and answers and a reminder about future webinars. So with all of that out of the way, I'll now hand it over to my colleague, Chris Rogers, for the rest of the presentation.
Thanks, Dylan. So we'll kick things off with just an overview of the New York-Sun program, as well as the pre-development program in general. For next slide. For those unaware, the New York-Sun program is the solar initiative under NY-SRTA, and the Affordable Solar Storage Pre-Development Technical Assistance Program is a subset of that, specifically part of the Solar Energy Equity Framework, which is part of the state-mandated goals under the Climate Act, driving 40%, a minimum of 40% of the benefits of all funding towards disadvantaged communities. Next slide. The program has been around for a few years. We've recently updated the slide in light of a recently updated petition and an updated new goals under the New York-Sun program. Our overall goal is the development of 10 gigawatts of solar statewide by 2030. With that goal in line, initially the pre-development program, we were accepting applications through the end of 2024, and now we've necessarily extended that through the end of 2029 with the goal of driving the installation of projects by 2030 so that we hit that target. The overall grant program, it functions to provide grants of up to $200,000 for community-led solar projects that are benefiting affordable housing that is owned or managed by affordable housing entities across the state, or with different groups that are working in close partnership with those. And this includes projects that are built in the Long Island region, which makes it a bit distinct and unique across NY-SRTA programs. Next slide. The overall review process, or the way that's intended to work, is that we review projects on a calendar quarterly schedule. That is, the next upcoming deadline is the end of September. The one after that will be in December 31st. Projects can be submitted at any point through the quarter, and then we organize review committees that are intended to provide reviews around that quarterly schedule. We've recently, I will say that there have been some delays in the reviews of these projects, and so it's taking a little bit longer than the 4 to 6 weeks after the quarterly deadline. But in general, the intended review process is intended to reflect that calendar quarterly submission deadline, which next slide, which you can see broadly on the next slide. And so you're welcome to submit applications before those deadlines, but we would encourage you to submit them by those deadlines. And we structure both these webinars and reminders to let folks know. So basically we're keeping awareness, and people are aware of the program's existence and availability. Next slide. Um, I think the key part, and one of the biggest parts of the program is that the grants are intended to benefit regulated affordable housing in its various forms in the state of New York. There are some very common forms of regulated affordable housing projects that are supported by the New York City's Housing and Preservation Development or New York State Homes and Community Renewal, or projects supported by the federal level by HUD. But there's a range of types of affordable housing that are in urban areas are multifamily, and in some more rural areas in the upstate region may include portfolios of single family housing. But the overall goal of the projects that will be developed here are solar and storage projects that are benefiting different types of regulated affordable housing. If you have any questions about whether the property that you are owning and managing, if you are an entity that operates affordable housing, if you're curious as to whether or not that does qualify as affordable housing, I would encourage you to reach out to me. Specifically, my email will be at the end of this webinar. Next slide. Additionally, and this is something that we'll likely be providing some more clarity on in the future, and maybe tweaking the rules, are the projects themselves or the grant applications. They're intended to be submitted by owners and managers of affordable housing, and that can include a housing authority or a range of different types of nonprofit organizations that manage affordable housing. It can also include community-led organizations that work closely with low to moderate income households, that is, households that are at or below 80% of the area median income. And those are really the primary beneficiaries of the grant projects themselves. We also allow applications to be submitted by technical service providers that are working in close partnership. But the key part in the applications, apart from the benefit of regulated affordable housing, is that they should be submitted by these either community-led groups, and they should be closely involved in the applications itself. Those are really the intended beneficiaries, and we want to provide some clarity there on the type of projects that applications that are allowable. Next slide. The next section, which I want to spend some time on, will be talking about updates themselves. The big news for this year from a NYSERDA perspective was the order expanding the New York Sun program. That's what I was referencing, where the overall installation target increased to 10 gigawatts of installed capacity by 2030. It's a significant increase from 6 gigawatts of installed capacity by 2025. There's a whole host of changes in incentives and adders affecting projects in the upstate region, as well as projects in the Con Edison region, which would include a range of any type of multifamily housing in the Con Edison region. Before that, and I just want to make a brief reminder on here, the added incentive for projects that are built directly on regulated multifamily affordable housing was expanded to the Long Island region. And so this is separate from this grant program itself, but projects that are built on regulated affordable housing in Long Island are eligible to receive a $1 per watt subsidy through the New York Sun program. Previously, there were no incentives available, but there's a range of incentives, and we have both there was a webinar back in May, as well as the slides from that is available on our website. And if you're curious about the full list of changes and the eligibility for those new incentives, I would encourage you to review either the recording of the presentation and or the slides for that. But the next slide, the more significant perhaps change, and it's not specific to it's not part of the pre-development program itself, but for those who follow federal policy, the Inflation Reduction Act was recently passed, which has a significant amount of implications for projects that are eligible for grants under this program. I want to pause for a second here and state that I guess the what I'm about to talk about is not intended to be, I guess, full advice, and there's still a lot that is yet to shake out from different regulators at the federal level, from the Treasury Department, the availability of funds that will be supporting these changes. I believe the act itself states that there's about a 90-day delay before more rules will be promulgated, explaining what these specific rules and procedures will be. But with that out of the way, there's a few significant changes in the Inflation Reduction Act, which would impact any sort of solar and storage project that is benefiting regulated affordable housing and low to moderate income households. The first is that there is now a mechanism where nonprofit entities will be eligible to receive a direct payment of the federal solar investment tax credit. Previously you required to have a tax liability in order to take advantage of what was a 26% ITC. That has now gone up to 30% and potentially increases higher for projects that are either considered a low-income benefit project, which again would include any project that is eligible likely for this grant program, as well as projects that are built on regulated affordable housing. I think the language that's used, that would be included under low-income residential building project. Those projects are eligible, provided that they're owned by a nonprofit, which would likely include a housing authority or a range of entities that own and manage regulated affordable housing. They're eligible for potentially 30% and going up to as high as 50% of the cost of a project in the form of direct payment. And again, I have to restate that the full rules for the application of these incentives we are at NYSERDA, we are waiting to hear the full rules and procedures for obtaining this to be explained in further detail. But it means that a significant, what we've seen under this grant program, the pre-development program, is that a significant amount of the activities are focused on securing financing for projects or for finding unique and novel structures to take advantage of the federal solar investment tax credit. And instead of requiring a tax equity investor, the Inflation Reduction Act would appear to basically remove that step altogether, because that amount would get paid directly to either the housing authority or a nonprofit affordable housing entity. What we're waiting for right now is what will be the full list of affordable housing programs that will be listed that would be covered under that qualified something as a low-income residential building project. There is a term for a low-income community in terms of where are all of those located in the state of New York that would make that eligible for a certain project. There's a requirement that the economic benefit must be at least 50% of the financial benefits. What exactly is 50% of the financial benefits of a project? What is going to qualify? Would there be a distinction between allocating credits directly to individual households, or would a master meter at an affordable housing entity qualify? These are all questions that people are still trying to answer right now, and that we will be waiting for the federal government to provide more clarity on. But what it means is that a lot of the activities under this grant program would directly benefit from the significant changes at the federal level in terms of what is going to be the cost of the project, what will be the financing needs of the project, will be the anticipated overall benefits of a project. And going forward, what we will be looking for from the NYSERDA side will be for project applications to include the flexibility. I guess because we're still waiting for full clarity as to what the rules are, what we will be looking for on the NYSERDA side are projects that acknowledge that there's significant federal policy in flux, and that there are plans that may change based off of the availability of this substantially increased federal solar investment tax credit. And so, I guess another way of putting that is a project application going forward, if it did not include references to the Inflation Reduction Act and to those considerations, it would be indicating that the project team perhaps is unaware of the potential substantial reduction in cost of an overall project and the benefit that could then accrue to low to moderate income households. So this should be a major part, even though this is not a NYSERDA program, it's not NYSERDA policy, this will be a significant part impacting this grant program going forward is all projects that have been approved under this program would be affected by the changes under the Inflation Reduction Act. Next slide. I mentioned this briefly already, but the order in April of this year expanding the NY-Sun program and changing the target, the most significant changes that would impact anyone who's interested in this program would be in the Con Edison region, specifically the increase in the applicable incentive. It's the Con Edison non-residential incentive. For projects that don't receive or have not been allocated the community credit, they're now eligible for a higher minimum incentive under especially if they are regulated multifamily affordable housing. But even projects that are not multifamily affordable housing are eligible for higher incentives. And so I would again encourage anyone, if you have not already reviewed NYSERDA's webinar, we have that in our resources for contractors section on the NY-Sun website, where there's both the recording and the presentation slides that were used that summarize the changes that have been made. Next slide. This chart basically it summarizes what changed in Con Edison. It bumped up this is for projects that don't get the community credit. Minimum is $1.20 for projects that are under 200 kilowatts, which is again most of what you would expect from projects that are built on regulated affordable housing. Next slide. And this is just writing out the changes for the multifamily affordable housing incentive. The increase for the non-community solar projects in Con Edison, it's now gone up to $1.60 a watt. The projects that are I guess they're community solar, they're eligible for $2 a watt. Also of note, the multifamily affordable housing incentive that applies to all capacity up to 200 kilowatts, but a capacity above 200 kilowatts that will receive the applicable non-residential incentive. Put in another way, a project that's 250 kilowatts in Con Edison, now the new non-residential incentive that it would be eligible for is $1 per watt. And so if it's 250 kilowatts, it would receive that $2 a watt up to 200 kilowatts, and then $1 per watt on that capacity in excess of 200 kilowatts. And so the total overall incentive or NYSERDA incentive in that instance would be $450,000 for a 250 kilowatt project, which is increased over what it was before the order expanding the NY-Sun program. Previously, the non-residential incentive for that project was much lower, so it is now increased. And again, it's important to note that this applies to projects that all the new incentives, and this is very relevant, applies to projects that have not been allocated the community credit, and this is within the Con Edison region. Next slide. The other part that I want to highlight was the inclusive community solar adder. We did add extra criteria under the pre-development program for projects that have applied for inclusive community adder funding that are also seeking funding under the pre-development program. It's essentially you need a higher benefit to disadvantaged communities or low to moderate income households. We've already launched round 2 of the program, and we're currently in the process of reviewing applications there. Next slide. and this is basically a summary of what those changes are. It's a higher guaranteed savings and a higher allocation percentage for projects that have applied for the inclusive community solar adder. Next up, we'll talk about the supported activities under the program. So this is something that I think we'll be looking to provide more clarity on. Project activities that are eligible in this program typically focus on organizational efforts for for the exploration of a solar and or storage project. There's certain types of early stage project planning that fall under the site assessment, under that umbrella of activities. But I think the area that we're still trying to find, the best way to articulate is that while certain site assessment activities are allowable under this grant, and it's hard to try to find the right way to explain this. The grants, they're not intended to fund, I guess, a study that someone is doing. I guess a research study for a project. That's something that's maybe almost more academic in nature. I guess the site assessment work, that should be a small component of an overall project. It shouldn't be the primary focus of an entity that is looking to develop a project. The grants, they're mostly focused on identifying the location where you can build a solar or storage project. It can be focused on finding the right partners for an affordable housing entity to work with, on securing the right amount of financing, and on conducting the outreach for community solar projects that are looking to allocate their credits to low to moderate income households. But I guess grant applications that are really focused on this kind of research study and are heavily engineering focused on permitting, those aren't intended to be supported under this grant program. And so we're looking to find ways to make that more clear for potential applicants. Next slide. These are some of the other common activities that have been included in projects in the past. Specifically, one of the big challenges are with different affordable housing entities is that individually can be cost prohibitive to try to develop a project, but if you can pool projects together, and there are plenty of grant projects that have focused on sort of consolidating efforts in a way that's intended to lower the overall cost of development and to spread the benefits more broadly. Next slide. The last part here is just how to apply. Next slide again. And the entire application process is done through an online portal where you can download the forms that are uploaded. Those get submitted through the portal itself, and we review those typically in the order that they are received. And with that out of the way, we'll transition into the Q&A section of this webinar. Dylan mentioned at the top, please put your questions in the Q&A section of the WebEx, and we will go through those in order. The first question is there a mechanism in New York to pass along the benefits of community solar to residents of regulated affordable housing that will not result in increased rent or decreased utility allowance? That is a great question. The short answer is that HUD is working on, well, there is efforts by both HUD and the Department of Energy to provide guidance on the utility allowance issue. As of right now, though, HUD has provided limited piecemeal guidance for a number of states on certain types of community solar programs. They have not provided blanket approval for community solar that will exclude it from counting in the utility allowance. And so NYSERDA has received approval for our expanded Solar for All program, that the way that it operates would not increase the utility allowance. The DC received they have a program also called Solar for All. They received special approval that it would not impact the utility allowance. Previously, California, under its solar on multifamily affordable housing program, but there's been no major nationwide proclamation that community solar will not change the utility allowance. We are working with the Department of Energy and HUD through a collaborative called the National Community Solar Partnership, and hopefully we will be able to provide that level of guidance to all sorts of, I guess, all managers of affordable housing. So it's not there right now for certain types of properties, which is this is really only an issue for master metered properties. If a property is individually metered and those tenants sign up for community solar, as a practical matter, there's not likely going to be any changes in the utility allowance because a certain number of tenants in a property sign up for community solar. There's also previously, with the support of a pre-development program, the Saratoga Springs Housing Authority, they did find a way around potential changes in the utility allowance by dedicating the benefits from community solar to a separate fund that wasn't going directly to utility bills and was paid out on a separate quarterly schedule. But this is an ongoing tricky issue. I'm happy. I would, I'm happy to have a follow-up conversation on it because we could have an entire call just on that question alone. And so please, send me an email if you're curious about. I think we did a webinar with the team that worked with the Saratoga Springs Housing Authority under this program where they spoke about that, which was successful, but they're still working through some things now. Next question: anticipated and Inflation Reduction Act rules and explanations. Let's see. Is NYSERDA considering a way to work with applicants or provide technical assistance to ensure federal and NYSERDA assistance? I will say, the Inflation Reduction, that's federal policy, and NYSERDA will never provide tax advice or will never work on that, not that way. I can say that there are certain components of the Inflation Reduction Act that we're going to look to supplement in terms of they have their census tract map for low income community, and we may try to find a way to include a link to that on our website. But in terms of right now, NYSERDA isn't providing tax advice on how to get the investment tax credit, and so that would not change. It is something that I did want to mention here because it's directly relevant to anyone who's working on these sort of projects. But that's a sensitive issue that I'm not sure if in the level that you're saying we probably wouldn't do, but indirectly, possibly in the future. The next one was round 2. The ICSA is accepting applications. The answer to that is yes. I'm fairly certain.
No, Chris, I can jump in there.
Oh yeah.
So round 2 of the ICSA is not accepting applications.
Okay.
We are currently open right now for and collecting feedback on the proposed round 2 design of the inclusive community solar adder. So we don't really have any specifics that we can provide on the actual date that we will be accepting applications for round 2. Really the most immediate thing right now is that, again, we're just accepting sort of feedback on those proposed modifications up until October 13th, I believe. We extended that back by a month given the passage of the IRA. So yeah, we definitely welcome you to provide feedback on round 2 of the ICSA. But in terms of the application go live date for that program, there's no date that we can provide yet.
Thank you, Dylan, and apologies for that misstatement by myself earlier. That's incorrect. So allow me to restate again. The second round of the ICSA is not accepting application. That was incorrect earlier. The next question isn't a national guidance from HUD. I would have to look into that, and Without looking at that, I would say no, not at all. Based on the communications that I've had, there has been certain stuff that they have made comments on related to a program that they are working on, but it is not comprehensive. I think I have been working with a number of groups to try to make this comprehensive, but no, this not yet. Um, what types of storage facility are you referring to? Understanding that most storage facilities are battery storage, but I guess there's no recommendation on technology for the I think for solar or storage. The I think that would be. I'm trying to think of what the best response. There's not a mandate in any type of technology that is used for the projects. That there are supposed to be benefits to the key part are the applicants that are involved in terms of owners and managers of affordable housing, and the I guess if there are benefits to to affordable housing, to low to moderate income households, if that is being done by, I guess when you're saying different technology, if we're talking about, lithium ion battery versus, I don't know, a different type of battery technology, I think that the battery technology would be less significant than who is benefiting from the projects, who is applying for a grant, and who is involved in the overall team. In terms of a microgrid, again, that the question there um, would be, who is benefiting from this project? How are you documenting, um, the benefits? If there was a grant application by a housing authority that was attempting to develop a microgrid, but they basically said that, the grant application, we're trying to develop a solar and storage project that's going to save money for our low-income residents in this specific complex of buildings, and we're looking to find the right partners to work with. We're going to put out a request for proposals for teams to bid on and design that. That would be a very standard application. I did want to go back to the HUD guidance and just to clarify, I am, I said that very definitively. I am not aware of anything that has come out that has excluded all types of community solar from utility allowance calculations. There's their low income program announcement that they made related to HEAP. Um, that is it's It is my understanding that that is a narrow exception. That is not for any manager of projects, excluding all solar credits um, from from the utility allowance calculation. And in fact, the calculation or the exemption that NYSERDA received for their expanded Solar for All program it was actually from just one part of HUD, and it didn't cover a separate bureau, which we're still working on right now. But it's my understanding, based on my conversation with HUD, that it's in the works, but has not happened unequivocally yet. And if it has happened in between the couple last few weeks and now, that's great news. But it's it is a gap. And I will pause there for to check through additional questions. And just going back to that link, yeah, that link is consistent with what they've sent out in the past, which is that community solar programs that are not tied to the cost of consumption are excluded. That's why the California Solar Multifamily Affordable Housing, the DC Solar for All, and New York's Expanded Solar for All are excluded from that, because the credits there are excluded from the cost of consumption. But that's only one type of community solar project, and it's not most of the community solar projects that are in operation in the state of New York. So it's an exception, but that's not comprehensive at the moment. And just checking through to see, I don't know, Dylan, if you've received any questions separately. I guess I did want to reiterate, you know, I think I maybe kind of downplayed this part, or maybe I spoke about it enough, but you know, the potential nonprofit and solar investment tax changes that are in play, hopefully would, if you pair that with a pre-development grant and the existing New York Sun incentive funding, which is $1 per watt subsidy in the upstate and Long Island region, and $1.60, $2 a watt in the Con Edison region. If you pair that with the potential cost, we are hoping that there will be, a significant increase in the viability of projects that are benefiting affordable housing. And we're still looking at this right now. The overall program, since it's been extended through the end of 2029, as of right now, there has not been a funding increase for the program, but the intent would be for the intent remains for this grant program to exist for as long as the New York Sun incentives are available. As of right now, we haven't run out of funds in any region in the state. There's a separate mechanism for projects that are on Long Island, but we would certainly make some sort of announcement if we were close to running out of funding. But the belief there is that it would be a temporary, if there was a temporary cessation in funding that was granted, that we would increase the funding to reflect the increased timeline for the overall grant program. And that's just for anyone who's curious about, whether or not you had to rush if funding was on the verge of running out. At the moment, there is sufficient funding for the program, and we anticipate more funding would be added in the future. Upstate is for the New York Sun program, Upstate is everything that is not the Con Edison service territory, or Long Island. So that's not New York City or Westchester County. Everything else is upstate. So that would include Western New York, Buffalo region. And I guess we'll give it a few more minutes until 1:45 or so to see if there are additional questions to come in here. And Dylan, give me a shout if you receive any questions separately.
Chris, I don't see any other incoming questions on my end.
And I think with that, I think we'll end early. I think with I guess for those who have questions about utility allowance and what those efforts are that NYSERDA is involved in, I would encourage you to reach out to me directly. Happy to have a conversation with you on that. And otherwise, I anticipate that, if the rules are, from the Treasury Department are promulgated between now, the next quarterly webinar will be the end of, I don't know if we put it on there, either I think we usually do it either end of December or maybe early January. If the rules are promulgated by then, I think the next webinar's focus will be on, we should all have more clarity there on what that benefit would be, for anyone who's applying for this program, which again, there should be a one-to-one overlap for those changes and anyone who's applying for this grant. Anyone who's applying for this grant, it by definition has to be a low-income benefit project. The projects, they must benefit low to moderate income households. With that out of the way, thank you everyone for your questions and participating, and we will see you in a few months.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Chris.